Hello, I'm the Commander Zander. I remember so the nostalgia critic doesn't have to. And neither should you. Well, the Daytona 500 is fast approaching. In fact, it's this Sunday. It's the Super Bowl of NASCAR! Which has me wondering, why haven't I done anything NASCAR related before? And so with that, I'm going to be counting down my top 12 favorite NASCAR drivers, which spans back to any time and era in the history of NASCAR. And yes, there are going to be some drivers whose legacy was created well before I was born that are going to be on this list. The reason why is because, well, I heard about them and done research about them, and I think they're going to be legends. So, obviously, they're going to be on this list too. And do keep in mind, I will mention this at the end of the video as well, if you don't see a driver that you like, that you want to mention, post them in the comment section or tweet them to me on my Twitter account, which I will mention in the descriptions after I get this video up and running. So check the descriptions as well for the Twitter account. With that, let's delve into my top 12 favorite NASCAR drivers. Why top 12? Because I like to one up the nostalgia critic. So, sit back and relax and enjoy my top 12 favorite NASCAR drivers. Number 12, Kasey Kahne. I only put him on this list because I happen to be a fan of Hendrick. I like all the Hendrick drivers, and because Kasey Kahne currently drives for Hendrick, I have to support him unless he's on my list. Plus, he's good looking, so the chicks will like that too. Take that, fucking Mizzou playboy with the glasses. And Kasey Kahne is also a solid driver. No, he's not one of the greatest of all time, but he's still solid enough that he can challenge for a win every single week. And that's mainly because he's with Hendrick. So with that, Kahne, you get to be on my list. But that's mainly because you're for Hendrick and I happen to like Hendrick. Number 11, Chase Elliott. Again, for the same reasons as Kasey Kahne, Chase Elliott is driving for Rick Hendrick. He also happens to be filling the shoes for one of the legendary drivers of all time. And for you NASCAR fans who are diehard NASCAR fans, I pretty much just gave away the answer. But for those who haven't figured it out yet, stay tuned, because you'll figure out why later. But Chase Elliott's been a nice young gun. He won the Nationwide Series. He has a bright future ahead of him. He happens to be the father of the great Bill Elliott, who won a championship himself. So I think there's some wonderful moments for Elliott ahead of him. Number 10, David Ragan. Alright, the main reason I've got David Ragan on my list is because, well, we went to the St. Louis Auto Show for 2 consecutive years at one point, and my brother, who also happens to be a NASCAR fan, is a big fan of David Ragan. The main reason why, because David Ragan was the driver that was at the St. Louis Auto Show the 2 years we were there. The second year we went there, again, we went 2 years in a row, he remembered my brother's name, and so for that, you earn a lot of respect for me. Plus, you're a really good driver, and you deserve a ride. I mean, it's unfair what David Ragan's had to put up with, because he is a great driver, and he doesn't get a chance to prove it because of the likes of Danica Patrick and Ricky Stenhouse, who are talent wasters. So, David Ragan, I think you're going to get an opportunity. I think you're a terrific driver, and you get my thumb of approval because you made my brother happy when we saw you again at the St. Louis Auto Show. So, David Ragan, you get to crack the top 10 in my book. Number 9, Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick, like Chase Elliott, had to fill some big shoes. Because technically, he drove the same car that one of the greats drove after his untimely death. Unfortunately, they had to replace the number with the 29, and Kevin Harvick did a remarkable job. In fact, he was the heart and soul of Richard Childress after he took over. And unfortunately, because the surrounding elements on Richard Childress were no help to Harvick, he moved on to another racing team owned by one of the other great NASCAR drivers, and he ultimately won a championship, and he came very close to making it back-to-back titles. In this day and age, that's hard to do. So, Kevin Harvick is a tremendous driver, and I happen to like him a lot, so he gets to be in the top 10 in my list. Number 8, Matt Kenseth. Matt Kenseth and I have something in common. We were both born in Wisconsin. He's the only NASCAR driver, to my knowledge, that is from the state of Wisconsin, and he also is a great driver. He started out at Roush Fenway Racing and drove the number 17 car, which is currently occupied by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. Kenseth won a championship with Roush Fenway Racing back in 2003 and has been a solid driver ever since. He ultimately moved on to Joe Gibbs Racing and replaced Joey Logano in the number 20 car. And he's done a remarkable job, and he came close to winning a championship with Joe Gibbs once. He lost a lot of respect from some of his fans because of what he did to Joey Logano. But then again, Martinsville fans certainly liked him for what he did. Mainly because of who ended up winning that race last year. But Matt Kenseth, despite that, is still a magnificent driver, and I happen to enjoy him a lot. Number 7, Tony Stewart. Tony Stewart is absolutely a joy to watch because he always gets emotional. He takes his racing seriously. He has a passion for racing, and I absolutely like that from him. He also happens to be a multiple-time Sprint Cup champion. He won one with Joe Gibbs in 2005, then started his own racing team, Stewart-Haas Racing, which is where Kevin Harvick currently resides, and won a championship in 2011 and had arguably the greatest chase run in the history of the format. At least until they changed the format a couple of years ago. And Stewart is terrific, and this happens to be his last season driving, and it's unfortunate that he never got a chance to win the Daytona 500. It's a tragedy, but I don't think it's going to tarnish his Hall of Fame reputation. I think Stewart is a Hall of Famer in my book. He is a terrific driver, and Stewart, we're going to miss you, and I hope you have a speedy recovery. Number 6, Darrell Waltrip. The current commentator for Fox was also a magnificent driver and king of Martinsville and Bristol. Darrell Waltrip is a champion of the past, not as great as some of the other legends, but he's still a legend of his own, and he won the Daytona 500 once and did the Icky Shuffle too. A fine moment for Waltrip. But he'll most notably be remembered for his wonderful catchphrase, "Boogity, boogity, boogity, let's go racing, boys!" which you will hear Sunday for the Daytona 500. Stay tuned for that. Number 5, Richard Petty. And I know there's going to be some NASCAR fans that are going to be wondering, why in the hell do I have Richard Petty that low? Well, there are other drivers that I happen to like that are ahead of him, but Richard Petty does deserve to be in the top 5 in my book because he is ultimately the king of racing for a reason. He's won 200 races. That's an untouchable amount. Of course, he did it in a day and age where parity wasn't really that strong, but still, 7 Cup titles and 200 wins makes him one of the greatest drivers, if not the greatest drivers of all time. And yes, I know he's number 5, but come on. Considering who else is on my list, it's a really, really tough baggage. So, number 5 in my book, but still very solid for Richard Petty. Number 4, Dale Earnhardt Jr., the heir to the Earnhardt throne. Dale Earnhardt Jr. started in DEI, which was started by his daddy, and then ultimately moved on to Hendrick because, well, DEI crumbled after the untimely demise of his father. And so Jr. moved on to Hendrick. He's had some success, not quite the success as far as wins, and he has not won a Cup title, but he's still a solid driver and the most popular driver in the circuit right now, if not one of the most. And of course he happens to be driving for Hendrick, and you know me, I'm a Hendrick guy. So Junior, you obviously are going to be up there in my list. Number 3, Jimmie Johnson, the 6-time Sprint Cup champion, and not just a 6-time champion. He's doing it in a time where there's a lot of really good drivers that are capable of winning the title. He did it in an 8-year span. And in the years where he didn't win the Cup title, he was very much in contention for it. This guy is a winner. And in my book, he's going to be a first candidate Hall of Famer for NASCAR's Hall of Fame whenever he decides to hang up the jacket. He is absolutely dominant. He's absolutely remarkable. And, of course, driving for Hendrick, he's going to be up there for me. But Jimmie Johnson could go down as one of the greatest of all times when his time does come to an end. Number 2, Dale Earnhardt Sr., or as I like to call him, or as many people refer to him as, the Intimidator. That's because his method of driving is to bully you out of the way and get a victory. Because, as they said in the documentary 3, second place is just a first loser. Or, in the words of Ricky Bobby, if you ain't first, you're last. Senior would do whatever he could to get a win, and his 76 wins ranks among the highest. But he won his 7 in a day and age where parity was starting to take over and there were starting to become some good drivers. So you could argue between him and Richard Petty of who's the greatest of all time. I refer to it as 1 and 1A because those two were magnificent for their eras. But Senior unfortunately had his time come and go rather shortly when he died on a last lap crash at the Daytona 500 back in 2001, which was 15 years ago, I believe to this very day. And so it's unfortunate what happened. Kevin Harvick, as I mentioned before, replaced Dale Earnhardt. They took out the 3 and just made it the 29. But then Austin Dillon came up to the Sprint Cup Series, and he's driven the 3 for the last few years now. But Dale Earnhardt Sr. left a lasting legacy that will be treasured forever. And the number one favorite NASCAR driver of mine is Jeff Gordon. It's pretty obvious. I'm biased for Jeff Gordon. I was a Jeff Gordon fan growing up. When I started watching NASCAR, he was the car that I would root for every single time. He is a true champion. He won 4 Cup titles, none of them during the Sprint Cup era, but he was a dominant figure in the 90s. When Dale Earnhardt Sr. was not winning, it was Jeff Gordon, and the Rainbow Warrior himself wound up winning 93 races and almost had the fairy tale ending when he finished 3rd in last year's standings in his final year of NASCAR racing. Now he's the commentator for Fox, and Jeff Gordon, I hope you have wonderful success with Fox. You are a magnificent driver. I absolutely admired you. You are a big fan, or I was a big fan of yours, and I enjoyed watching you race. And I'm going to miss you on the racetrack, but I think you're going to have great success on the track or on the commentating booth. So Jeff Gordon is number 1 in my book. So, with that, those are my top 12 favorite NASCAR drivers. If you didn't see your favorite NASCAR driver on my list, feel free to post them in the comment section or tweet them to me. I would love to hear some other drivers because I know there's a lot of really great drivers that I missed. And had I had a bigger list, they probably would have been on there. But seeing as how this is top 12, I could only squeeze the 12 that I could. Let me know about my list. Let me know about the drivers that you like that were mentioned. And just give me your opinion because I happen to enjoy NASCAR. And I'm sure there are plenty of NASCAR fans out there as well. And stay tuned for the Daytona 500 on Sunday because that will be one hell of a race. I'm the Commander Zander. I remember it so Darrell Waltrip can say, boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.